We have a comment here from Lord Viscerate, and he asks, in its current state, is Naruto Storm Connections worth buying? Should I just keep playing Storm 4? And should you guys just keep playing some other game that you like? Is this game worth it? And what I will say is that in Naruto Storm Connections' current state, right, it is nowhere near as good as Naruto Storm 4 is. And, okay, in some ways it is better, right? In the sense that they've gotten rid of game-breaking glitches. In the sense that it's very consistent. The online connection still is really bad, so that is, if they just change that, then for sure it would be worth it. But it's a very sort of plain Jane, I don't know if vanilla is the word, but plain Jane, simple way to play, right? It's a bit more like checkers than it is like chess. Is there some complexity to it? Of course, there's some complexity to it. But in terms of the player expression, in terms of the micro movements, in terms of a lot of things that you can do, it's very simple. There are still broken things in the game, for sure. But most of the game-breaking glitches and most of the super broken stuff, like Pain was super broken, the armor was super broken. There was a way around the armor, but Pain just ended the play, right? It stole your turn. Consistently, 100% of the time, there wasn't even any wiggle room. It wasn't like it was 80% of the time or 90, it was 100% of the time. So, there's things that they did to improve it, but the issue is, right, is if you played Storm 4, it's going to be very difficult for you to go to connections because the emphasis is more on the 3-man teams and the supports, right? You want Shikamaru, Tamari, Kamui, Kakashi, you want Karen, you want these types of supports, you want Ajura, right? You want those types of supports. Still Hagoromo as well. And it's, of course, in other games there's meta supports, but the reality is that the supports and connections are so strong and so pivotal to the meta that they play the game for you. And this is a really interesting point, and I think it's true. And a couple of you already agreed with me, so shout outs to you. And it's like, if you pick a really strong main and you pick very weak supports, right? And you go up against someone who picks a very weak main, like say PTS Hinata, and then really strong supports like Karen and Tamari, you have equal or higher chance of winning than the person with the strong main, probably, which is crazy, right? That isn't the case in the last games. In connections, the supports carry the main, and in the past games, for the most part, there's some caveats, but for the most part, and exceptions, but for the most part, the main carries the supports, and the supports just amplify the main in the past games. And the interesting thing is, though, is that there's something I came up with or coined called the team synergy multiplier. Now, because of leader switching, right, in connections and Storm 4, those are the only games that have leader switching, you have a very interesting effect of a team synergy that goes on, right, which I was an early adopter of that term socially in the community as well, and how important that was, because people didn't really talk about that too much before I came back on the scene for about 3 or 4 years ago. God, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 years ago, how old this channel is. But it's really interesting. So specifically, I came up with this thing called the team synergy multiplier. And if you can get 2 or 3 characters, especially with me when I use 2-man teams, it's so important to have a high team synergy multiplier. So it's more important to have that synergy, right, and a high team synergy multiplier, than it is to actually have 2 strong characters. So a good example would be like, in Storm 4, you could use like 6-pass Madara and, I don't know, like as a 2-man team, right? You could use like 6-pass Madara and, I don't know, maybe Taiya or something like that. Or 6-pass Madara and I don't know, The Last Sasuke or something. That's not the best example. Six Pass, Madara, and maybe Karen. You know, like, it's, or something like that, right? Or just two very strong characters. It's horrible that I can't think of another strong character. I guess Kaguya and Six Pass Madara, right? In a two-man team. It's like they're both really good characters, but they individually work better with other teammates, if that makes sense. Right? So, like, your end result when you build a two-man team or a three-man team in Storm 4 and in connections with leader switching mechanics is you want to have the highest team synergy multiplier. So this is what you do. So this is a really interesting example. Both in Storm 4 and in connections, I'll see if I still have this. If you pick Taka Sasuke with Deidara, two-man team, that's one of my patent teams that I use, even though I don't really share it with you guys. A super amazing team, super high team synergy multiplier in both games. Completely transforms and makes the game really interesting, fun, and unique. And on their own, those characters aren't particularly, you know, strong or amazing. They're not meta relevant, okay? In those games, they're really not. They're more mid-tier characters or lower-tier characters. You know, there's a way to play Dare where you play Keep Away and all that, sure, whatever. But really, that falls apart if the connection is good. If it's like super laggy and you pick Dare pretty much in any game, you just win. You can, you know, because that affects your dashing, that affects your a lot of things. The lag affects a lot of things that just affect base characters. So that's really interesting. So is it worth it? My answer here is if you pay, you know, if this game goes on mega sale and whatever the initial cost was, say it was $80 or $100 or whatever, if it goes on a mega sale to 20, maybe 40 or 20%, no more than 40%. I would never pay more than 40%. You know, less than half. It needs to be a lot less than half. You know, probably like 10 to 40%. Somewhere in there is a reasonable amount to pay for it. So if it was $100, okay, let's go 80. If it was $80, then you should be paying somewhere between $10 and $30 for this game. No more money than that. It's not worth it. The developers and whoever is responsible for this game, you know, the publishers, the developers, I don't know, they abandoned the game. They really didn't do a good job, right? The best versions of this game for me were the first and second patch, but I actually think as well on release date, as crazy as it was, as broken as it was with all the armor and the pain, Shinra Tensei and all this stuff, it was way better on release date and more fun once you learned how to play the game. And I was learning the game, and I finally got to that point where I could teach you guys how to play. I have a lot of like third Raikage gameplay that I could potentially show you. I already put it up. It's called The Third Raikage Was Unstoppable Naruto Storm Connections or whatever, and it only has 377 views. I uploaded it 11 days ago, but it's really good. You get to see like things just kind of clicked in, right? Like you basically have what we have now, but it was more fun, right? The problem with the version that we have right now is it may be more balanced. It may be whatever you think is good about it, right? But it is not nowhere near as much fun. So that's the issue, right? Is I feel like with these games, there has to be a reward. There has to be a fun factor, and there has to be some kind of reward. And the reward has to be some kind of satisfaction that you feel when you play the game. And the interesting thing is this comes from a very talented, very smart individual, Lord Viscerate, where I'm just going to quickly put up his combo here so you can see. Okay, so this is amazing, okay? So we can see here. Here we go. So check that out. This is a really nice hollow step here. Okay, uses the tag to stun and continue the combo, but then this hollow step here. So the tag, and then this hollow step. Oh my god, amazing. Really skilled, really good stuff. I mean, once you learn it, it's like not super hard, but it's really good. But those juggles there, look at this. So a lot of people don't realize that part of the combo and Pain's combo is always good in every game. But these juggles are fantastic. Wow. So this type of stuff, you can do it at some level in connections, but it's not, you know, it's not the same. It's not the same, and it's you can't get as much depth. Like, a lot of people might laugh at that, but I've spent almost a decade proving to people that the Storm games have an enormous amount of depth, right? And it doesn't take that long to get to that depth. And let's see here. Of course, this is in connections too, where when you like dash them in the air, if they're in the air, they'll be stunned. But the problem is that this tilt is way better than the Jitsu is in connections, which is sad, and it doesn't cost chakra, right? It is worth buying, but it's not worth buying at the price that it is because it's not a complete game, and they didn't balance the game properly. Like, actually, a lot of the things people complained about, like all that infinite chakra and stuff like that, was actually super fun and really good for the game because it changed the flow of the game, right? It changed the flow of the game, and it made the game a lot more boring, a lot less. Like, I used that chakra for mobility options for Minato, and my Minato was crazy like before, right? It was so difficult. Obviously, I made him crazy now too, but in a different way. I had to completely change my playstyle, and it's barely fun compared to before. It was so high octane and so much fun to have that infinite chakra. Now wait, before people criticize me on that, I'll say there's an easy fix for that, right? All you had to do, well, I haven't figured it out exactly, but all you have to do is implement the, if you're standing still, um, or if you just used a Jitsu, or if you're standing still and you're not in a combo, your chakra should charge slower. But if you're in a combo and you're getting comboed, right, and the substitution bars are gone, that thing should be flying. Both of your chakra bars should be going all the way. Basically be full at the end of that combo, and the damage scaling should still be there. So that way, you solve both problems. You solve this problem of people Jitsu spamming you, because people will just use their supports and use their primary Jitsus of their main to play a really horrendous, stupid game where there's no combos. But this game was supposed to be super fun, where you get into a combo, you do all these Jitsus, you do all these grab loops, Jitsus, and you go crazy, but there's damage scaling to save the other person. And then there'd be resets with the kunai stands. The reset could happen any way. It didn't have to happen with a kunai stand. It could have happened with a more acceptable, socially acceptable, more competitive, more professional way, in the eyes of people that thought it was bad, right? But the kunai stand was actually fine the way it was. People just didn't want to learn how to use it, right? I know that's a sore spot and spot of contention for a lot of people, but it was fantastic once you learned. Initially, I didn't like it either, especially when people did it to me, but once you learn to do it, the person who has the advantage and has the momentum keeps the momentum. Whereas there's very little momentum, very little flow, very little rhythm to the game. It's very, very safe and takes baby steps in connections. And of course, I proved in a weird way that even though what I said is true, there's an exception to the rule, where I did a series going ranked online series with Minato going from 0 BP to 10,000 BP, and I never used supports ever for my advantage to win the game. And I got there with over 80%, 81% win rate, never using supports with a nerfed alive Minato into the ground. How was he nerfed? His grab was insanely nerfed. The damage was nerfed, so you can't grab loop damage people anymore. I definitely still try to do it, but you can't really do it. You have to win so many more engagements to get value out of it. It's not really worth your time, right? So the only thing that grab does is kind of make it lore accurate, where Minato is kind of safe for a small time and you have some time to think and clear your mental stack, right? If you don't know what mental stack is essentially, cluttering up your mind, and then you're able to make better decisions if your mental stack is clearer or not overloaded. And if it's overloaded and you're thinking about too many things, you're more likely to make a mistake and not make the right move. And you can't really, you're kind of cluttered up and there's too much congestion there in your mind. It's interesting stuff. So, um, there needs to be a lot of changes. Like even things like the Kaguya Ice, uh, nerfing that. I felt a similar way to that than I did to Pain Shinra Tensei, where they could have kept those things strong, but more skill based and balanced. But it is much better now the way that it was than the way that it was, because the way that it was is the only way you could really play that character is in a Kaguya mirror. She was so strong and so much on her own level with mechanics that you would have need to kind of created a rule where you could never use her in a competitive scene, tournaments, anything like that, first to tens. But the only thing you'd be able to do would be like, hey, we can do that. We can do these tournaments in first to tens, but only if we're doing mirrors. Oh, you want to agree? I want to agree? Sure, let's do it. And then you see who's the better Kaguya player. That's how strong she was, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of weird caveats and like weird situations, but the end result is that Storm Connections just is not as fun as it used to be. And a big part of that would be the actual connection, which I've talked to about ad nauseum, where we don't have rollback netcode and the game is just, you know, the games that get rollback netcode, I'll talk about in another video, is that essentially games that benefit them, right? Like pay-to-play games, gotcha games, like My Hero Ultra Rumble essentially has like a rollback netcode or equivalent of that. And a lot of gotcha games and those are console, right? But a lot of gotcha games on like mobiles, like even like Pokemon Go, it's like 88 to 97% perfect. There's some days that it's not so good, or some times during the day, but then otherwise it's flawless, right? But then the like connections in a lot of anime games are the opposite, right? Like even JoJo's Battle R, I hear. Well, I tried it too. It's just like so bad, right? And Demon Slayer, oh my god, that was the worst, dude. It was so bad, and I love that game. I'd be playing that game right now with some Zenitsu. I really like it. I think there's depth in there too once you get to a higher level. I think at the beginning stages there's really no depth, but that was a good game. They did some interesting balancing things, but this is the thing. They make it like so all games have these unique things, but they don't take the best things from all games and put it into one game and take out the bad things. It's almost like they're just trying to create unique, interesting games, but they don't really care if they work, right? They just care if you buy the game and if you pay the money for the game. That's it. So it's up to you as a consumer to decide, should I actually buy this game and should I put my money and time? The more important thing is it's not the $50 or $100, right? It's not about being a brokey or not. It's about being not throwing your money away. I mean, even, it'd be better to give that money away to a charity, than it would to play the games, because they're not, developing your skills in a meaningful way. They're not really giving you a meaningful experience. It's more of like let me have you feel. So, I don't know. For me, it's weird because it's a hollow experience, but for a lot of people, it's not. And by a lot of people, I mean, there's not a lot of people. There's only probably a few thousand people, right? That play these games, even Storm 4 and Connections. And compared to the millions of people, millions and millions of people that bought the games, there's a reason why these games fall off. It's not just because people are doing things or have a life. People are still playing like Street Fighter 2 from the Super Nintendo. People are still playing Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5. Like, there's all these games, right? And if you make the game well, if you make a good product, people will buy it, right? That is the bottom line. The bottom line is, if you're a real anime fan and you're a Naruto fan, this could be the game for you, but most likely it's not, because it's just not a complete product.